Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the September 13th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how you can engage in the process. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Engagement Director. And today's episode is brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas and Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas. So I want to begin today by setting the stage. So we are currently in the very short window between the second and third called special sessions of the Texas Legislature, a series of sessions that will seemingly never end. So last week, Josh joined us to recap the second special session and reminded listeners that the third special session, which is scheduled to begin a week from today, September 20th, would largely focus on redistricting and allocating funds from the American Rescue Plan Act with a dash of the legislature once again trying to bully trans kids. So today we're going to focus on the budget. This is our budget blockbuster edition of Weekly Witness, but we also hope that you'll join us next Tuesday, September 21st from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. for a Redistricting 101 with redistricting experts Bonnie Bruce and Genevieve Van Cleve. Y'all, I can't stress this enough. Redistricting is a big deal that will impact public policy for the next decade and beyond, frankly. And I know that many of you have questions about that process because you keep asking. So please register for that event at texasimpact.org and invite your friends to join the party as well. But today we are excited to be joined by a good friend of the program, Every Texan's Eva DeLuna Castro, who serves as the program director of the Invest in Texas team, to talk about the state budget and the impact that the regular and special sessions have made on money in Texas. So Eva, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I guess just to start, has this break in between specials been long enough for you, or you feeling all right?
It would be good to have a whole year go by, but that is not going to happen, clearly.
Yeah, not this year. So let's start out. We have a lot to cover today. The budget has been in focus over the course of the last few months and will be even more so over the course of the next month. The next month. But let's start with the future first. So check my math on this. I want to make sure I get it all right. But so Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act in March, both to stimulate the economy and to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And if I'm understanding it right, Texas has $16 billion in those federal funds to allocate. And the decision was made by state leaders during the regular session to punt on allocating those funds until the special session that would be tied to redistricting. So first of all, did I get that right? And second, could you explain the process and what we're looking at going into this third special session?
Sure. And the way you described it as punting is exactly right. The legislature could have chosen to do something in the regular session. They didn't have to wait. In 2009, the legislature, in facing a very similar problem, economic crater basically had opened up. That legislature chose to go ahead and use $12.5 billion in the budget that they were about to write. This time that did not happen. You may also remember there was a kind of a real lag getting school districts the money that they were entitled to under other rounds of federal aid. So the choice was made to wait. It was kind of something during the regular session where an attempt was made to create a special federal board that would have just involved like a very few House and Senate budget writers, not the entire legislature. And the House decided they did not want that. They would rather like everybody have a say. So at that point, the regular session was in its like last month or so. The decision to wait until a special session that also had redistricting obviously complicates things because there's other political kind of horse trading going on. But other states have gone ahead and used all of their rescue plan aid. Some have just used a part of it. They could use it through 2024. So the legislature could come back in the next regular session and still have some of it left unused. The call for the third session says legislation appropriating the American Rescue Plan Act. So that's pretty broad. It could be just the state part of it. It could be some of the money that's targeted for housing and energy assistance programs. There's just so many other parts to this, but we think they're talking just about that $16 billion that you mentioned, just the part that can be used to respond to the COVID pandemic. Obviously, we're not out of the woods yet. Or it could be used to replace revenue. That's something that makes us different from the CARES Act that we got in 2020. So it could just be used to replace spending that's already in the budget. And I can talk more about what would be good and what would be bad about that. It could also be used for one-time things that we've all thought should have happened in the regular session, like helping, maybe if not fix the grid, helping homeowners be better prepared for the next time there's a really cold winter or hot summer, weatherizing homes, building homes that are more energy efficient, like something to reduce the demand for electricity in Texas. There could have been assistance like in the way of helping people with utility bills, water bills, electricity bills. So there could have been direct assistance to consumers already. That might happen in a special session if enough people demand it. What else? Yeah, I can talk more about what y'all can advocate for, but where we are right now is they could use some of that $16 billion for one-time things that help communities recover, or it could be used just to kind of set things up for more tax cuts that are unsustainable, or in a way to offset the cost of like the really bad budget developments that we saw, the border militarization and some other could just kind of bad uses of tax revenue.
Yeah, so there's a lot of information in there. I guess one of the things our folks will be listening for is, if they're going to be talking with their state representative, their state senator over the course of the next week or two, what should they be asking for out of these funds? What are you hoping the state will use those funds for?
Like I mentioned, something that actually helps communities recover. And this is also something you can do at the local level. So along with the money, with I know this is about what the legislature can do, but a lot of you all, I'm guessing, are also involved with your city council and your county commissioners, how they decide how their rescue plan money gets spent. You may actually have a much bigger impact, and it's a lot easier to know sometimes what your immediate local community needs. Again, there's the ways to deal with mental health needs, homelessness, housing, parks, street repairs, water, wastewater, broadband. There's so many specific uses that you can look to at your local level, and that you have a little more time to be prepared. Your city and counties have already written their budget that started right now in October. That'll take effect in October, but for next year you can get prepared. The legislature is trying to figure out how to put some of this money into the 2022 and 2023 budget. But they actually have until 2024 to spend it. So this is a multi-year process. And I think encouraging, if you know somebody who's on Senate Finance or House Appropriations, convincing them to wait and see how things go. Right now, the Delta variant has just totally devastated communities again. So there's still a need for hospital personnel and just like direct healthcare needs. But there may also be an effect again on the state economy where the state revenue just doesn't recover as quickly as the controller had said. So holding off may be part of the strategy, but directing state money to things that, again, help us be in a better situation for the next either public health emergency or natural disaster. There are just so many unmet needs that we have never tried to address, and this gives us maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity. It is one-time money. A lot of people have been saying it's like this money we get from the feds is just for a couple of years and then it goes away. So using it for things like infrastructure projects or one-time IT costs or something that you pay for once, you renovate, you modernize, and then you don't have that ongoing cost. But there's groups working on housing, affordability, energy efficiency. I mentioned there's environmental ways that this could be spent. There's cleaning up orphaned gas wells, for example. So there's a lot of things that the state could spend billions of dollars on that would be better for Texans and for our economy. Bad uses of it would be like using it in a way to kind of set the stage to cut school property taxes. And then when this federal money runs out, we don't have a way to keep supporting schools. That would be bad. It's not on the call yet, but that is where this could be going.
All right. I agree that would be bad. It seems like it's going to be a pretty busy special session between trying to figure out how to spend $16 billion and doing redistricting at the same time. Do you have any idea yet in terms of what the process is going to look like on the budget side of things and where the opportunities for input would be?
If it's just an appropriations bill, and that's the only way that this is going to be done, then House Appropriations would hear a proposal. Senate Finance might hear the same exact thing. So a chance to go testify. And I know a lot of people still feel like it's not safe to go to the Capitol. The House at least allows for electronic comments. You can do that. And I think you can do it from anywhere in the state. So there are ways to express your opinion. You can also, of course, just email everybody that's on Senate Finance and House Appropriations or call. But the appropriations process just sends money to an existing program. If it's something that's brand new, like if, let's say, we wanted to have the state just send $100 to every household in Texas, the way the feds did the stimulus payments, there isn't any state law right now that allows for that. So you'd have to have a bill make its way through a policy committee, and you'd have to have the appropriation made. So that might be a little trickier, but at least for now, what the governor put on the call is just appropriating the money. So anyone who's interested in like how you get the details, it's like creating a brand new thing that state law doesn't allow, is a little more complicated. But if they just send the money through existing programs, that's a lot more straightforward. But testimony in House and Senate, directly contacting the leadership and the heads of the budget committees, and that's the basic way. Following what they're doing, I think just paying attention always helps, because the way the border funding happened, it's really hard to say that everybody knew what was happening and everybody understood what was going on, and that everyone agreed that was the best use of another $1.8 billion in state money.
Yeah, I want to get to the border funding in just a second on the supplemental from the second special. But before I usually do shameless plugs at the end, but you personally and every Texan are so great at keeping folks up to speed on what's happening with the budget. Do you have any, or are you going to have any updates or ways that people can stay engaged as this moves forward?
For the state part of the relief plan, we are trying to at least be aware of what groups out there are already proposing. A lot of you may know we're a think tank, a think and do tank here in Austin. We don't have members. A lot of the groups we work with do, so they understand from their members what they want and what they would like to see happen. So we're still getting a better sense of what other groups out there are proposing: housing, shelters, family violence, public health. It's like there's so many unmet needs. So just getting a good idea of what's out there. And what I've seen so far doesn't come anywhere near to adding up to $16 billion. So if y'all have a plan for how to improve anything the state does, let me know. But yeah, so we're coordinating or kind of being aware of what it is that groups out there are saying needs to be done. We also have on our website a toolkit for people wanting to get involved in the local advocacy that I mentioned, a toolkit for city and county officials, and ways to understand what is a more equitable way to use these dollars. What areas are the most underserved? Dallas, for example, is thinking about getting water and wastewater service to people that live in Dallas but aren't connected to the city water and sewer system. So there's ways that you can do this that again help families be better off in the long run without an ongoing cost.
And I'd also add, because we're encouraging all of our folks, Eva, to be on Twitter so they can communicate with their elected representatives, that you are a great Twitter follow. That's DeLuna Eva. So make sure y'all are following there to stay up to date. Going back to the second special session, you mentioned the funding for border militarization coming through the supplemental bill. And I think Josh said last week that was the first time he can remember that Texas Impact actually opposed a supplemental appropriation. But I think it did surprise a lot of people. Can you just bring listeners up to speed? What happened in the second special session? We obviously had the Article 10 funding and the border militarization money. What happened there?
Well, I guess they really were two different supplementals, and one of them had what everybody said was like the good things that needed to be in the budget, like funding the legislative branch of state government. It's like, yes, it would be good to fund the legislature since they have to pass the Appropriations Act.
We all agree on that one, right?
Yes. We all seem to agree on it, but it was the very last thing that they did before the days ran out on the second session. So that one supplemental bill, House Bill 5, is the one that had restoring legislative offices, the LBB, everything you could think of that the legislative branch does. Also, it provided a 13th check for TRS retirees. Everybody said that was long overdue. There was also a small amount of property tax cuts. If you buy a new home, there's ways that the appraisal district will figure out right away that you're entitled to an exemption. So it had a bunch of things in it that were going to add up to about 1.2 billion. The increased spending for basically incarcerating migrants that are charged with criminal trespassing. It's the governor using his disaster authority to create a whole new way to like have the state incarcerate people, eventually turn them over to the federal government. So it's just, the more you look at it, the less it looks like a good use of, again, scarce state dollars. But I would say it was filed, I think, on a Friday, and by Tuesday it had sailed through the Senate. So it's not, if you've seen the legislature do anything, it takes like years and years and years for ideas to work their way through. This did not. It just kind of sailed through, and the two bills combined add about $3 billion to the current budget. The controller had said there was maybe 8 left unused, so this reduces the unspent dollars to about $5 billion. And I think it was just like how much this cost, and the fact that it came out of nowhere. I mentioned that teacher retirees got a 13th check with what was spent on the border, the increased border money, not even the existing, but the brand new money. You could have given retirees a 14th check and a 15th check. Or the combined amount of money being done for these things could have actually made the TRS system actuarially sound, which would have made for a cost of living increase. That hasn't happened in so long that most people don't even remember the last time they got it. So there could have been so much done for foster care. Foster care was another thing that was deemed an emergency. It got maybe 70 million from the supplemental. Border spending now is more than the entire Family and Protective Services Agency gets for everything it does to protect vulnerable children and adults from abuse. So again, the fact that this kind of skyrockets into one of the 5 biggest things in the state budget, like overnight, with very little scrutiny, they did decide to at least add some performance measures. So they're going to get a report every quarter on what is being done with all of this money, how many miles of fence have been built on private ranches. But it's considering what they could have done with that when nothing has been done to fix the grid or to help families be better off than they were a year ago. It's more than just disappointing. It's appalling. Yeah.
So we've now had a regular session. We've had 2 special sessions. We're moving into the third special session. Where are we after all of this? And if we're preparing our listeners to have conversations during, in theory, if an interim ever comes, what's the message on the state of the budget in Texas, and what should our messaging be to our elected officials moving forward?
Obviously, some of your members are worried more about some of the services provided by the budget. or they realize that if the state doesn't do it, their local community has to pick up the slack. So I know it's not a one size fits all kind of answer, but I think because more than 40% of the budget, the general revenue budget, one that comes from the taxes we all pay, is public schools. I think before the regular session started, everybody was worried that schools were going to be cut. So the fact that didn't happen, everybody is seeing as a big win. And it is, but why would we have cut schools when we had more than $40 billion in federal aid that could have been used to keep that from happening? Like there was absolutely no reason to cut schools after, like, I don't know, even in January, that was known to be the case. So the reality is that schools didn't get any extra help from the state. They didn't get what they need to recover enrollment decreases and deal with inflation. So they're already losing ground compared to reality. The federal money that they get from to deal with COVID is again, it's one-time money. It will go away. So the state still has to figure out a way to keep paying for schools. House Bill 3 in 2019, everybody thought that was great, and we made this huge stride forward, but how do we keep that going? That question has never been answered. Higher education, if you're worried about higher education, that was cut. Formulas for general academic institutions, 4 years, 2 years. Community colleges, I think, got even the worst of it. If you're worried about access to higher education, higher ed took most of the cuts from the 5% interim reductions. That's usually where major cuts end up getting made, because we can't cut public safety or education. So higher ed is what takes the hit. What else? The concern, obviously, that we didn't expand healthcare coverage to millions of Texans that could have used it even without a pandemic. But now that's still a challenge for our communities. I mean, expanding Medicaid or doing whatever it is you want to call it that gets more working Texans access to healthcare, not just showing up in the ER. That is still a big concern. There's ways that Congress could be changing that so that we can finally go ahead and do what most other states have done. So that's another area of advocacy. And in public safety, I mean, I just keep thinking of so many things that could be done with this rescue plan money. Air conditioning prisons. Those of you who work on criminal justice reform may know that there's just things that Texas does that make it as hard to be in prison as is humanly possible. And it's not just the inmates that are there, it's the prison guards. So air conditioning these facilities, now that we have this, could be, again, something that could be done. But there's so many things that you could contact your elected officials about. One major thing is, if they tell you that what they want to do is give you property tax relief, if that's what they're trying to steer us towards, telling them, like, thanks but no thanks. Like, you'd rather have the relief of knowing that your kids are safe when you send them to school. That's the kind of relief you want. You don't want to know that schools are going to be canceled a month from now because all the teachers have COVID. So something that really provides long-term peace of mind, I think. $100 cut in your property tax bill is not going to do it. So I think understanding that right now they're kind of poised on another couple $2 billion cut to school taxes with no way to pay for it. We never figured out how to pay for House Bill 3. They're going further down the road where they might dig that hole even deeper. And just telling them that that's not what you want. They think that just giving us property tax cuts is what will help the local job market or job creation, but that we all know that's not true. We need revenue to pay for schools and roads and water and wastewater, just the basics. You can't do that without property taxes.
And you didn't mention in that list the grid, right? Which y'all, we all saw that was a problem. Eva, anything, any other closing thoughts or questions I didn't ask you that you want to weigh in on?
Let me think about this. I should always be prepared for anything else, but there's just too many things going on right now in this particular session. Obviously, I mean, I can talk about the money issues all day long, but what is really the most distressing is just all scapegoating of Texans, and there's just so many scapegoatings going on that it's massively depressing. But it's like the divisiveness of the social. It's just all the so-called social issues that when those are used in combination with the budget issues, like the veto of the legislative branch, and just kind of forcing the legislature to do everything that's on this laundry list of really bad proposals. There's everybody I talk to is like, how is that not just straight up blackmail? And that's I think has been the most distressing. It's like using the budget process to force a lot of bad policies on Texans after a year and a half of what the pandemic has done to our stress levels and anxiety. And then, that again, it's like, I wish there were a happier note to end on, but it's like, that's the kind of thing that people need to get involved in, despite the voting restrictions and all of that. It's like, this is not good for Texas. So whatever we can do to get past this and not have the sessions we've had this year. Anything y'all can think of to do on that note is clearly what's needed.
Well, I agree. It's been a rough few months. I mean, for all of the people who do this advocacy work and for the people who pay attention or are engaged in the process, for many of our listeners, it has been frustrating. One of the things that I keep saying is I find hope in being able to visit with members who are engaged in this work enough to know that it should be frustrating right now, and enough to know that Texas deserves better. And so my hope is that we'll continue to have these conversations. We'll let people in our communities know who aren't paying attention what's happening, and try to get them on board to have some better days ahead. So I know I gave you a chance for shameless plugs toward the beginning, but anything else you want to leave us with in terms of where we can find more information?
Our website, everytexan.org. Our blog might be the most digestible thing, but on Twitter, most of us are also on Twitter. Chandra Villanueva is definitely the person to follow on school finance, and she'll be letting everybody know if it looks like bad things are happening in the way of school finance. But yes, we have a legacy event coming up too sometime soon. Next week. It's virtual, I think. But so if you have any way of supporting nonprofits that you haven't used up for the year, we always appreciate people's support too. So thank you for having us.
Eva, thank you so much for the time today, and thanks for the work that you're doing every day on behalf of Texas. It's always great to have a chance to talk with you. And friends, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've stayed with us this long, please make sure that you leave a rating or review. We love to see when folks leave the highest rating possible, and we love great reviews. So that will help even more of your friends find the program. And also to remember to keep an eye on Texas Impact social media for upcoming events and opportunities. Remember, we'll have the redistricting event next Tuesday evening. If you have questions about any of that, you can reach out to me at scott@texasimpact.org. And finally, remember that if you appreciate Texas Impact and the Weekly Witness community, please make sure that you and your congregations are members. You can do that by going to texasimpact.org/join. Friends, these are unprecedented times. It has been a long few months, but that just means that more than ever, Texas needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.